emission standards, saving the average American consumer much more than $1,000 when they buy a new car. But now we're talking about close to $3,000. Regulation cuts combined with our tax cuts and tariffs are the reason why largest automakers have announced that they're going to be spending in excess of $100 billion in the United States in the next period of time building new auto plants. We're bringing our auto plants and factories roaring back to life, not even mentioning the other things. We're building thousands of businesses in the United States. Remember, on my first day, they said if I could ever get the Dow up to 50,000 in my last year, in other words, in the fourth year, that it would be an unbelievable miracle. Don't worry about it because it'll never happen, they said. And if I could get the 7,000, they said, in the fourth year, they said it will never. Let's not even talk about it. I have things. Let's not even waste our time talking about it. Well, at the very end of my first year, the Dow hit 50,000. Now it's over 50,000. And 3 days after that, the S&P hit 7,000. So we didn't have to wait till the end of the year. We just waited till the end of the first year. We've never had a country in a position like this, and a lot of it's due to tariffs, and a lot of it's due to a great election, and a lot of good things have been done. One of the good things I did was put Lee Zeldin in charge of our environment. So I'm going to ask Lee to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Regulation in the history of the United States of America. Referred to by some as the holy grail of federal regulatory overreach, the 2009 Obama EPA endangerment finding is now eliminated. This action will save American taxpayers over $1.3 trillion. What that means is lower prices, more choices, and an end of heavy-handed policies. With today's announcement, American families will save over $2,400 for a new vehicle. 16 years ago, an ideological crusade within the Obama administration set off the most costly regulatory power grab our country has ever experienced. The 2009 Obama EPA endangerment finding led to trillions of dollars in regulations that strangled entire sectors of the United States economy, including the American auto industry. It claimed new powers over the vehicles we drive, even though the best reading of the Clean Air Act clearly states otherwise. The Obama and Biden administrations used it to steamroll into existence a left-wing wish list of costly climate policies, electric vehicle mandates, and other requirements that assaulted consumer choice and affordability. And who paid the biggest price? Hardworking families, small businesses, millions of Americans who just want a reliable, affordable car to get to work, take their kids to school, or go to church on Sunday. The endangerment finding and the regulations that were based on it didn't just regulate emissions. It regulated and targeted the American dream. And now the endangerment finding is hereby eliminated, as well as all greenhouse gas emission standards that followed. The red tape has been cut. Manufacturers will no longer be burdened by measuring, compiling, or reporting greenhouse gas emissions for vehicles and engines. And the forced transition to electric vehicles is eliminated. No longer will automakers be pressured to shift their fleets towards electric vehicles, vehicles that are still sitting unsold on dealer lots all across America. And as a cherry on top, we are ending the federal government's push to get manufacturers to install that Obama switch, the almost universally despised start-stop feature. There will be no more climate participation trophies awarded to manufacturers for making Americans' cars die at every red light and stop sign. It's over, done, finished. Under President Trump's leadership, vehicle manufacturers can once again build what Americans want, not what politicians and bureaucrats in Washington demand. President Trump campaigned on reviving the auto industry, and he continues to deliver win after win after win, ending electric vehicle mandates, getting rid of the Biden CAFE standards with Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy, and securing massive new U.S. manufacturing investments and all of the jobs that come with it. Affordable cars mean opportunity. That means and mobility for working families and rural Americans who rely on their vehicles every single day. The Obama administration twisted itself into some kind of mental pretzel to invoke authority it didn't have and to sidestep Congress. They claimed that 6 greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles, some of which aren't even emitted from vehicles and trucks, contribute some amount above zero to global climate change, what they said endangered public health. But their wild web of mental leaps isn't prescribed in federal statute. The EPA cards upended the best reading of the Clean Air Act, as well as 50 years of EPA precedent on what constitutes regulable air pollution. In the 16 years that intervened, precedent in lower bright enterprise Trump immediately tasked on submitting requirements, recommendations, research on the legality and continued applicability of the 2009 endangerment finding. And at Trump's speed, he wanted that research and recommendation turned around instantly. We looked at the Clean Air Act. We looked at what the highest court in the land had said, and we used a very simple metric. If Congress didn't authorize it, EPA shouldn't be doing it. Congress never voted for these climate mandates. Section 202 of the Clean Air Act wants EPA to regulate the heck out of greenhouse gases emitted from motor vehicles. Can clearly make that the law, which they haven't done for good reason. Today, we dismantle the tactics and legal gymnastics used by the Obama and Biden administrations to backdoor their ideological agendas on the American.
So that is Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, announcing that the Trump administration will repeal the.
Donald Trump roared back U.S. climate rules. Donald Trump roars back U.S. climate rules.
Honor, it actually is a horror. Now endangering the health of U.S. the car industry, but also anything that has to do with the general electricity. They are simply digging their heels in to use polluting, inefficient technologies that are no longer increasing global decrease of demand for these technologies because they are much more expensive, they're lower performing, they're polluting, and they are completely unproductive. So what he has done here is put a huge handbrake on the energy transition in the United States, with the result that he has opened the space for China. And today we know that China is first of all the largest investor side where all other countries are moving forward, and they have decided to simply park themselves on the side of this rapid highway and maybe even start flashing some orange lights for attention?
Christina, it's not a great line. We're going to try and re-establish that line. I'm just going to bring in Matt McGrath, who also is listening. I mean, Christina makes a really good point, though, there, that you know, he talked about cutting regulation. We've got 129
on electric cars, as they stated, and they may also go for more polluting cars. But as you say, they bring right away into conflict with standards in California and in other parts of the world. And we don't know if those standards in California will stand up in the courts, and I'm sure that will be tested soon as well. So I think there's a lot to be said about how this will play out as yet, and most of it probably will involve legal argument as to how these new developments, this unleashing, if you like, of regulation will actually impact American citizens, automakers, power plants. An awful lot yet to be decided on this.
But if the EPA, Matt, is now saying that greenhouse gases aren't dangerous, or limiting greenhouse gases is no longer for all science based, more broadly.
That's a all these gases, and that's supported by the Supreme Court to overturn that regulation with another regulation. It would have to be passed by legislators, and ultimately it's the inability of Congress to pass laws on climate change that have led us to this reliance on this particular regulation, and the division in the United States means that kind of legal change, that kind of passing of an act, is very difficult to see in the foreseeable future.
Let's bring Christina back in. I think we might have re-established that line.
Stabilized, but is reducing their emissions at a very rapid rate. So that is actually very good news for the world. It's also bad news for the United States because the United States is increasingly uncompetitive. Whether the gains that we will have from the highest emitter are actually larger than the losses that we will have on climate responsibility in the United States still remains to be seen. But let's remember that when China decides something, because it is a centralized decision system, everyone then decided. That is not so in the United States, because states will still continue to have liberty to compete actually for competitiveness in markets. And the most important thing here is that by repealing the Endangerment Act, what is going to happen is we will see a patchwork of standards and regulations throughout the United States, which is going to make it very difficult, certainly for the vehicle industry or for the emission, for the electricity generation industry, because they're going to have to with many different standards and regulations. I think what is going to happen there is that post-Trump, there will be a clamor to please urgently standardize all regulations and all standards in order to avoid the very expensive patchwork. And that we know will be toward increasingly decarbonized industry.
I want
these now going to have last cry are causing and heart and even brain diseases in the United States and elsewhere. So actually the cost is going up of the consequences of a carbonized economy. One has to think that less carbon, less cost. That is the rule. All of the renewable energies have come by 80 the past decade, and they continue to be better performing, more efficient, and increasingly less and less expensive. That is not so of fossil fuels. They are exactly the opposite. So I really wonder.
On Kerry, who was so instrumental in getting the endangerment findings in place, and of course negotiated during the UN Climate Summit in Copenhagen. So we really want to get his thoughts. But let's just listen to these questions, and then we'll.
Years under our feet, and they're trying like hell to save a half an ounce of fuel. The whole thing is just crazy. Please, go ahead, please.
Is climate cooperation with China no longer in America's interest? And could you please confirm the first?
Look forward to it. He's coming, and I look very much forward to it. No, our relationship with China is very good right now, and this is, not relevant too much having to do with China, what we're announcing today. But no, my relationship with President Xi is very good. Yes.
President, following your meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, has your thinking changed at all relates to these negotiations with Iran or the timeline with Iran?
We have to make a deal, otherwise it's going to be very traumatic. Very traumatic. I don't want that to happen, but we have to make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time, and they got midnight hammer and sick. And it will be very traumatic for Iran if they don't make it. Look, then it'll be a different story. But we had a very good meeting yesterday with Bibi Netanyahu, and he understands. But it's ultimately up to me. If the deal isn't a very fair deal and a very good deal with Iran, then it's going to be, I think, a very difficult time for them in the back. I guess over the next month, something like that. Yeah, it shouldn't take. I mean, it should happen quickly. They should agree very quickly. Yeah.
Mr. President, we might be heading into a partial government shutdown. When was the last spoke with Chuck Schumer, and do you still feel Democrats are negotiating in good faith?
Well, a week ago I spoke, but we have to protect our law enforcement. Actually, the Supreme Court gave a ruling, or one of the courts gave a very big ruling on masks that you have the right to use them, for personal protection if you want. So I don't know how that interjects. They want law enforcement to be totally vulnerable and put them in a lot of danger. They have some things that are really very hard to approve, frankly. As you know, it's only pretend. We had various of the other bills. That's all done, but we're left with this one. We have to protect our law enforcement. Very important. Please.
Why does Prime Minister Netanyahu want you to stop negotiating with Iran?
He is, you're saying stop entertaining, stop talking to them? Didn't say that, we didn't discuss that. I'll talk to them as long as I like, and we'll see if we can get a deal with them. And if we can't, we'll have to, it will be very tough for them. I'm not looking for that.
Mr. President, zero Israeli hostages left in Gaza because of you. Thank you for that. And now that the war is ending in Gaza and Israel, I want to know, do you believe Bibi bears any responsibility for the security failures that we saw on October 7th?
Well, October 7th was a rough time, and I guess everybody's responsible. It's you had to look, but it was a terrible attack. It was a sneak attack. It was as violent as unfortunately, I've seen some of the results at levels that probably even you, good reporter, but probably you haven't seen. It was a horrible thing that took place. People were surprised. It was a surprise attack. Nobody saw that coming. He didn't see it coming. Nobody else would have seen it coming if they were in his position, I don't believe. But I can tell you he's been a very good wartime prime minister. He's been very strong. We've worked with him very well. We had tremendous success with Iran and everything else we've done. And he really has been. He's been extraordinary as far as a wartime prime minister. Not easy. And, you have a president that refuses to give him a pardon. I think a man should be ashamed of himself. A pardon over this trial that's going on. The president of Israel, the primary power he's got is the power to give pardons. And he's not, he said he's given it 5 different times, but he doesn't want to do it because I guess he loses his power. I think the people of Israel should really shame him. He's disgraceful for not giving it. He should give it. But Bibi's been a great wartime prime minister, and I've been the best friend to Israel. I think that they've had, a lot of people say, beyond presidents that they've ever had, and we will continue to be. Yes, ma'am.
Say that, Mr. President, voter ID holds very well nationally. Even the majority of Democrat voters want it.
Right.
So why do you think Senate Democrats are resisting the SAVE Act, and what is your strategy and realistic pathway to getting the SAVE Act passed? Freeing their elections for the next generation?
It's such a great question. I appreciate it, actually, because it's called the Save America Act. We've changed the name. It's the Save America Act, and the Democrats are against it. I heard one of them say, we will stop the Save America Act. No, we're trying to save America. And it has to do with largely voting. And basically, it's got 3 very simple points. Voter ID, photo ID, but voter ID with the photo, right? It's got the confirmation of U.S. citizenship. You have to be a citizen. So you have a vote, you have an ID. That's about a 99% one. And I think 90% with Democrats. Then you have confirmation U.S. citizenship. That's about a 99% one with Republicans, about 86% with Democrat politicians because they cheat on elections. And then you have no mail-in ballots. And it would be no mail-in ballots, very important. We're the only country in the world that does a system like we do. We're the only country in the world that has mail-in ballots. The way we do this is unbelievable. It guarantees cheating. So it's no mail-in ballots with the exception of disability, illness, military, or if you're traveling, you can get an exemption. If you happen to be out of the country for a good reason, you can have an exemption. So with exceptions, it's no mail-in ballots and assure the security of our crooked elections. We have crooked elections, yeah.
Have you fired or disciplined that staffer who posted the video from your account that included the Obamas?
No, I haven't. That was a video on, as you know, voter fraud. And fairly long video, and they had a little piece that had to do with the Lion King. It's been very well, it's been shown all over the place long before that was posted. But that was a very strong, and I'm sure you saw it, a very strong piece on voter fraud. And the piece that you're talking about was all over the place many times, I believe for years. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, were you aware that Secretary of Commerce visited Epstein's Island, and do you continue to have...
No, I wasn't aware of it. No, I didn't. I actually haven't spoken to him about it. I wasn't, but from what I hear, he was there with his wife and children. And I guess in some cases, some people were. I wasn't. I was never there. Somebody will someday say that. I was never there. Yeah, please.
This announcement that you made today, Mr. President, comes on the heels of a January jobs report that smashed industry expectations.
Smashed all records.
And big feature of that was you reprivatizing the economy, an economy that was bloated with federal employment under the previous president. What's your message to Americans following this jobs report that smashed industry expectations? Is this just a sign that the best is yet to come?
Thank you. The jobs report's amazing in certain ways because we have tremendously fewer federal employees, way down. And now I could have left them and added to what we did, and we would have had almost 100% employment. I could have gotten a great kick out of the fact that we're 100% employed, but we got rid of tremendous number of federal workers, and they hated me for it. Now they love me because most of them have gotten jobs in the private sector for 2 and 3 times more money than they were being paid by the federal government. We had some jobs where you had 10 workers for one job, 10 workers for a job that one person should be doing. And we've gotten rid of a lot of those jobs. And by getting rid of them, these people became available to work in the private sector. And as you know, the numbers are incredible. So the job numbers are incredible. The financial numbers are beyond belief. Again, they thought it couldn't be done in 4 years, and I did it in 1 year. And the numbers you're going to see is these, I don't know if you notice also construction numbers, the jobs for construction workers. You know why? Because they're building plants all over the United States. That's why. And when these plants open in a year from now, some sooner, some a little bit later, but when these auto plants, AI plants, and thousands of other types of plants, when they open over the next period of a year, year and a half, you're going to see numbers like we've never seen before in this country. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
So there you have it. Donald Trump, who has just announced that he is dismantling one of the central pillars of
Thank you for your time. That was Donald Trump addressing the press and
he's called it
the
the biggest
people.
deregulation in history, steamrolling